everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really pleased to be hosting this webinar today, and we're really excited to see so many people joining us from literally all over the world, which is wonderful. And people who work for NGOs and governments and private sector. So welcome everyone. And please continue to put your institution name and the country that you're calling in from in the chat box. So welcome. I'm Kristen Patterson, and I am the director of Drawdown Lift with Project Drawdown. I'm very pleased to welcome you all and to host this webinar with this amazing panel that we have today. And I'd like to kick things off by sharing that this is a webinar series. So this is the first of 2 webinars. The second one will be held next week on Wednesday, June 1st. So please join us for that one as well. And now I'd like to turn it over and welcome Yolanda Wright, who is the Global Director of Child Poverty, Climate, and Urban with Save the Children. So thank you, Yolanda.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, everyone. Welcome. The first thing I want to say as moderator is that this is being simultaneously translated in French. So if you would like the French interpretation, you can click on the little globe symbol at the bottom and select French, but you do need to mute the original audio if you want to listen in French. Thank you. So in the next hour, we're going to explore the question, how can climate solutions contribute to boosting human well-being and alleviating poverty? This is an issue really close to my heart, as my job title suggests, working for Save the Children on climate and child poverty. And we really understand, I think most of us here today, that we actually can't deal with one without the other. And so looking at these solutions that address both at the same time is incredibly important and a really wonderful opportunity. And I'm joined by 4 fantastic panelists who I'll hope to be getting the best out of over the hour. One is Dr. Yusuf Jamil. He's a research manager at Drawdown Lift. Yusuf leads Lift's research efforts focused on synthesizing research, communicating and encouraging decision makers to implement climate solutions that can contribute to human well-being, alleviating poverty, and fostering equity in low and middle income countries. So Yusuf will be giving us a little presentation at the beginning of the session. And then we'll be moving to other panelists. We've got Dr. Jill Baumgartner. She's an associate professor with the Institute for Health and Social Policy and Development of, these are long words, epidemiology, biostatistics, and occupational health at McGill University. She studies exposure to environmental pollution and its effects on human health in the context of urbanization and development, and she's a member of Drawdown Lift's Advisory Council. And our second panelist is Dr. Ademola Brimo. He's the Senior Natural Resources Management Specialist in Agriculture, Global Practice with the World Bank. He's got expertise in agriculture and rural development, integrated landscape management, and resilience of ecosystems and people to global change. And our final panelist, last but not least, is Glory Ogwegbu, and she's the founder and CEO of Renewable Energy Technology Training Institute and Climate Smart Nigeria, where she promotes climate change education in Nigerian institutions and provides capacity building on renewable energy technologies. Gloria is also a member of Drawdown Lift's Advisory Council. So we've got some amazing panelists and speakers today, so who are all going to be discussing this issue of how to address climate change and improve well-being at the same time, focusing on low and middle income country contexts, which we know historically have the lowest greenhouse gas emissions, but yet are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And we know all of the extreme events that many of the countries are experiencing around the world today. You only have to read the front cover of The Economist on the global food crisis right now that's being exacerbated by climate change in many contexts, including a major drought ongoing in the Horn. I think it's the 4th consecutive drought in the Horn. And we know places like India and Pakistan have just experienced incredible heat waves just in April. So this couldn't be more relevant, really. So we're discussing the findings of this report that came out in March. Drawdown Lift brought out a publication, a landmark publication called Climate Poverty Connections, Opportunities for Synergistic Solutions at the Intersection of Planetary and Human Wellbeing. And if you haven't seen that report, we'll make sure that the link is posted in the chat for you. We're deep diving into just 3 of those key solutions today. And as was said earlier, there'll be a second session diving into the others. So today we're focusing on agriculture and agroforestry, providing clean electricity and adopting clean cooking. So to kick off the session, I'm going to pass over to Yusuf, who will share some of the key takeaways from the report, and then we'll move into our panel discussion. And if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section of the chat, because we're hoping to have 10 minutes at the end to answer some of your questions. Thank you so much. Over to you, Yusuf.
Thank you, Yolande. I'm pleased to share a brief overview of our work on how climate solutions can also contribute to improving human well-being and alleviating poverty. I would like to start with a poll. And the question is, what percentage of people in the world live on less than $7 per day? And you have 4 options on your screen right now. Okay, so we have the answers here. 34% of you chose the answer C, which is 48%, which is actually the correct answer. So about half of the world, 7.9 billion people, live on less than $7 a day. While that number may surprise you, it's also important to remember that 10% of the people in the world experience extreme poverty, which means that they live on less than $2 a day. So I want to begin with what is drawdown. So greenhouse gas levels have been climbing since the industrial age. Drawdown refers to the future point in time where levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stops climbing and starts to steadily decline. Drawdown would be a milestone in reversing climate change and eventually reducing global temperatures. Project Drawdown's mission is to help the world reach drawdown as quickly, safely, equitably as possible. We are a US-based nonprofit known for the best-selling book Drawdown, which was updated in 2020 with the Drawdown Review. The organization is a leading resource for climate solutions. We have identified 80+ climate solutions to address climate change, ranging from reducing food waste to shifting to clean energy. The solutions are interconnected, and we need all of them to reach drawdown. So what are these solutions? Project Drawdown solutions are 1, that are currently available, 2, financially viable, 3, have proven potential to reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and 4, have sufficient data available to model how much greenhouse gases can be mitigated, reduced, or sequestered through these solutions. Atmospheric greenhouse gases come from 5 major sectors: electricity production, food, agriculture and land use, transportation, industry, and building. Together, these sectors are responsible for 90% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. Project Drawdown solutions address each of these sectors to either minimize greenhouse gas emissions or enhance the ability of natural sinks, such as those associated with agriculture and land use. So we can start by reducing the sources of greenhouse gases by shifting electricity production, increasing energy efficiency, and shifting diet. For instance, shifting to renewable energy and reducing food waste can reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly. We can support and enhance the natural sinks of carbon dioxide found in nature by improving agriculture practices and protecting and restoring ecosystems. Finally, we can address inequalities in society and achieve broader transformation through people-centered solutions like meeting everyone's health and education needs. Taken together, these are the 3 connected areas of drawdown framework for climate solutions that we must pursue. Climate change and poverty are inextricably linked. People living in extreme poverty, particularly women and children, are more vulnerable to natural disasters and commonly live in regions that have been and are projected to be most impacted by climate change. In low and middle income countries, addressing climate change and improving the well-being of people experiencing poverty needs to occur simultaneously. Our report summarizes the evidence around human well-being co-benefits of climate mitigation solutions with a focus on rural communities in Africa and South Asia. In the report, we honed in on 28 climate solutions that are most applicable for rural under-resourced communities. We identified a subset of 28 Project Drawdown solutions that generate significant co-benefits for poverty reduction and overall well-being, shown as colored bubble in this figure. The gray bubbles represent other Project Drawdown solutions that are not included in our report. We grouped solutions with similar human well-being co-benefits together. For instance, distributed solar photovoltaics, small hydropower, and geothermal have similar co-benefits and are grouped together in orange as solutions focused on providing clean electricity. Thus, the report focuses on 5 groups of solutions: improving agriculture and agroforestry, protecting and restoring ecosystems, fostering equity, providing clean electricity, and adopting clean cooking. To assess the evidence of these 5 solution groups on human well-being, we included 12 dimensions of human well-being derived from the donut economics that focuses on ensuring that people can thrive while preserving the health of the environment. The next step in our work was to evaluate the evidence of co-benefits for the 5 solution groups on each of the 12 human well-being dimensions. To identify these co-benefits, we reviewed over 450 peer-reviewed articles and reports. The left side of the figure shows the 5 solution groups. The second column shows each solution group's potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions between 2020 to 2050 at a global level. For instance, adopting clean cooking has an emission reduction potential of about 86 gigatons. On the right side of the figure, using blue and gray icons, we list co-benefits generated by each climate solution groups. The direct co-benefits are in blue and the indirect co-benefits are in gray. For example, adopting clean cooking, shown here with the purple bubble, directly contributes to decreasing energy poverty, and it indirectly contributes to increase in income, better health, improved gender equality, and better education. Next, I will take a deep dive into 3 of these solution groups highlighted in the blue rectangle. In the next webinar, we will dive in the solutions focused on protecting and restoring ecosystems and fostering equity. Changing the way we grow food is critical to address climate change. Our analysis suggests that improving agriculture practices globally has an emission reduction potential of about 9 gigatons per year. And to put that number in context, the annual global greenhouse gas emission in 2020 was approximately 50 gigatons. So improving agricultural productivity is also a key pathway for eliminating poverty and hunger. In 2020, more than 2.3 billion people, or 1/3 of the global population, experienced moderate to severe food insecurity. Globally, food insecurity among women is 10% higher than for men. And the current war in Ukraine has further increased the food insecurity in many African countries that are dependent on wheat and fertilizers import from Ukraine. It is estimated that improving agriculture is 11 times more effective at reducing extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa than investment in other sectors. Through this systems diagram, we highlight the human well-being co-benefits of implementing the group of climate solutions focused on improving agriculture and agroforestry. On the left side, the green bubbles are agriculture and agroforestry climate solutions. On the right side are human well-being dimensions co-benefits that can be generated by implementing these solutions. A co-benefit is direct, shown by thick gray lines, if there is an explicit link between the climate solution and the human well-being dimension. A co-benefit is indirect, shown by thinner gray lines, when a direct co-benefit enables other co-benefit. Direct and indirect co-benefit of climate solutions can lead to cascading positive effects on other human well-being dimensions, and we classify them as ripple effect. Agriculture and agroforestry related climate solutions have direct co-benefits around income and work, water and sanitation, and food, and many indirect co-benefits around network, education, energy, housing, health, and gender equality. For instance, solutions like sustainable intensification for smallholders and abandoned farmland restoration can lead to higher yield and thus boost food security and or increase income, which provides a buffer against extreme climate events. Increase in household income can be used to purchase energy or a mobile phone that can then further help in reducing the food waste or improve access to better market. Food security and increase in income can then contribute to better health and also contribute to gender equality. And finally, direct and indirect co-benefits can then lead to improvement in social equity and peace and justice, which has long-term benefits for people and their countries. So let's move on to energy. Energy and human well-being are closely linked. Minimizing electricity poverty is critical to improve human well-being in sub-Saharan Africa, where about 570 million people still lack access to electricity. Electricity and human being are closely linked. A recent study of linkages between multidimensional poverty and electricity found that people in countries with limited access to electricity also suffer from high food insecurity, lack access to improved water and sanitation, experience low income and work, and endured poor health. We saw during the recent heat wave in the Indian subcontinent that the power cuts were pervasive and lasted for hours. Households that lacked access to alternative form of electricity found themselves in a challenging situation to minimize the impact of the heat wave. Providing access to clean electricity not only has the potential to reduce emissions tremendously by about 2 gigatons between now and 20 per year, but more importantly, it has the ability to transform the well-being of remote, under-resourced, vulnerable communities. Clean electricity provides direct co-benefit for the energy dimension and through it, all other dimensions of human well-being. It is crucial that households deprived of electricity leapfrog to clean electricity to allow them to reap the benefits of electricity without experiencing the negative health impacts of electricity produced by fossil fuel and also contributing to climate change. Electricity opens the door for job creation, supports education, increases income, reduces food insecurity, improves access to clean water and sanitation and health, advances women's economic empowerment, and build resilience. For instance, several studies have shown that access to clean electricity through solar photovoltaics has contributed to increase in income through longer working hours or by obtaining new jobs. Off-grid solar photovoltaics can also enhance the quality of health services in remote areas by enabling services at night and improve food security and access to clean water and sanitation in many rural communities. 2.3 billion people do not have access to clean cooking fuel, with disproportionate impact on health, gender equality, income and work, and education. It is estimated that the combined adverse impact of solid fuel cooking on health, the environment, and gender equality cost US $2.4 trillion annually. Adopting clean cooking not only has the potential to reduce emissions tremendously by about 2.5 gigatons per year, but massively improve health, gender equality, and reduce time poverty. Similar to electricity, adopting clean cooking fundamentally addresses energy poverty as a direct benefit, while all other benefits are indirect. The health benefit of clean cooking are massive. Review studies and global analysis have shown that clean cooking can have positive impact on adults, including a decline in respiratory and non-respiratory symptoms. One study showed that switching to clean cooking could prevent more than 22.5 million premature deaths between 2000 and 2100. Adoption of clean cooking can substantially reduce the time poverty associated with collecting cooking fuel, providing family members, especially women and girls, the opportunity to pursue education and income activities. Our thorough review provides solid and substantial evidence for numerous human well-being co-benefits of climate change solutions. These solutions generate significant direct and indirect co-benefit to human well-being, particularly around income and work, health, food security, education, gender equality, and energy, and would be transformational in helping to alleviate poverty and increase resilience to current and future climate challenge for all people, and especially for women. The win-win solutions presented here also have a strong climate benefits. According to our estimates, the total global carbon dioxide equivalent reduction potential of all the 5 solution groups presented in our report is approximately 690 gigatons between 2020 and 2050. As Ademola and Monica Jan wrote in the foreword of our report, properly designed and implemented policies for low carbon and resilient growth can also help address poverty and inequality, enabling millions to live safer, more prosperous, more inclusive, and more sustainable lives, improving the well-being of people experiencing extreme poverty, and addressing climate change can and must be complementary. There don't have to be trades-off between boosting human well-being and climate actions. We are eager for the report to be used by decision makers, policy makers, the private sectors, and donors to shift programmatic and funding strategies around climate and poverty solutions and prioritize climate solutions with clear, substantial benefit for human well-being. You can download the report from the homepage of our website. Over to you, Yolande, and our panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. That's great. Thank you. Keep bringing forward the great questions in the Q&A box. So we're going to just ask the panel a few questions now and give them a chance to comment on different aspects of the report. And I'd like to start with you, Jill. The report concludes that there are climate mitigation solutions that can both address climate change and contribute to poverty alleviation. How have you seen this play out in your own research and work? Can you share some examples with us?
Sure. Thanks for the question and the invitation to be here. So as a bit of background, I work in household energy. And I'll talk about 2 examples where I think I've seen successful implementation of clean energy in the area where I work. So the first is really when the government has a really large population level investment in some kind of specific climate change solution that's so large that it reaches everyone. And this includes poor communities, or ideally includes poor communities. One really impressive example that I work on is the coal to clean energy program in northern China. So household coal burning was a big contributor to outdoor air pollution. And so what the government did was invest in updates to the electricity grid and transferred hundreds of millions of households to electric powered heat pumps rather than coal. So this was a massive investment. Preliminary studies indicate that this was successful and that households did transition. And that was one way to sort of have this major investment and change that happened at a population level. I think the second is where there's an investment in an industry that's climate friendly. So that can be market driven, it can be a government investment, or even NGO contributed, or some combination of the above. And I think the report, which I hope people have read, does a really nice job of highlighting, for example, that over half of the households that currently don't have electricity access, they need access to either mini grid or off grid technologies because they're remote. And I think I wanted to give a specific example related to that because it reminded me when I was working in Yunnan now over a decade ago, which is one of the poorest regions of China, nearly every home had access to a solar water heater. So these were rural households. They were largely off the grid in some places, but they had these in their homes. And this was filling a need where, they had access to warm water when they needed it for washing or bathing. And it really did prevent them from using their solid fuel stoves to heat water, which was a significant proportion of their energy use. So, I do think a challenge for a lot of these programs is ensuring that they don't increase inequalities, so that the very poor aren't left behind. And that requires a really targeted effort, but it's also a place where I think researchers and civil society can really insert themselves into those kinds of programs.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you for bringing up that very important issue about thinking really carefully about the inclusion aspects. Ademola, I wanted to come to you next. Can you give us an example about how climate finance has been able to address both climate change and boost human well-being in rural communities? What would your call to action for multilateral organizations or donors be when looking to fund work in this area?
Thank you very much, moderator. An example that readily comes to my mind is the Komako project in Zambia, which is a story of successful partnership in landscape management involving the government, the World Bank, and the private sector. The project is in the eastern province of Zambia, characterized by high rates of poverty, deforestation, as well as other forms of environmental degradation. And these problems just imply that the community's hope lies in bringing back trees to protect the environment, minimizing the impacts of climate change, and securing agricultural yields and improving their livelihoods. So the Komako project scaled up the adoption of climate smart agriculture to 19,000 farmers, implemented sustainable forest management activities in more than 100,000 hectares, and sequestered over 260,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So you see climate change and development going together simultaneously, addressing climate change actions. Now, in addition, farmers received about $1 million in carbon payments for emissions reduction generated by the Komako project. You see there an example of results-based financing through funds devoted to climate action. So this kind of transformative projects need to be scaled up to boost the well-being of rural communities. Now, in terms of climate action, what would I suggest? The first thing is this: the development community needs to realize that the time frame for transformative climate action is shrinking. And if we do not take action immediately, there will be many climate catastrophe. And the task of ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity will be much more difficult to achieve. Now, climate action is not cheap. We have to note that. But the cost of inaction pales in comparison to the cost of taking action and addressing it headlong. For instance, in our recent study, we found that when you want to adapt Africa's food system to climate change, you need just $15 billion per year in Africa. This compares to the cost of inaction of about $201 billion. You can see it there that it is better and it is more cost effective to take action. So what then is the call to action? Climate action is an imperative. It is not a choice. And the time to act is now. The financing will need to come from a variety of sources, from national budgets. That is the first thing. The private sector will also need to contribute their own quota. It is good to note that there's a lot of effort going on in terms of net zero decarbonization by 2050 and so on. So we need more push and more action and more financing as far as that is concerned. And lastly, the bilateral and the multilateral group organizations would also need to come to the aid of developing countries to boost action with respect to climate action. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Ademola, and thank you for really emphasizing the urgency and the economic case for action. So Glory, it's your turn. Thank you so much for waiting. The question I have for you is, research shows that energy, as we heard from Yusuf, energy is one of the most important dimensions of human well-being, and it can have so many different benefits for well-being and economic activity. How have you seen this in your own work and with Climate Smart Nigeria and RETI?
So I'd like to start by saying that Yusuf has actually given us a very important statistics to look at. In Nigeria, in Africa, 10 million people die every year because of poor or no access to electricity. And the number is 4 million for clean cooking. Women who cook with dirty fuels. That's the amount of people that die every year, right? So the issue of access to energy is that of urgency, right? As a matter of urgency, electricity is needed, energy is needed for cooking. So, but one of the big challenges we encountered was that people, 70%, Nigeria, for instance, 70% of Nigerians were not aware of what was going on about climate change or poor environment. So before you're talking about anything about energy or solar power or climate solutions or linking to poverty, you have to address the fact that people don't know what you're talking about in the first place, right? And so the challenge I encountered is that there is this big problem about unbelief. People do not believe that there's something going on with the environment and there is a need to make change, right? And so we thought that it was very important to start by educating, right? If people know that there is this amount of opportunity with solar power or clean energy, then they'll be willing to learn the steps that they can take. I'll give a quick example. You have a woman who is in the village who uses dirty fuel to cook because that is what they can afford. And I know that I've said this a lot of times, that you have to consider the fact that they are using that because that's the level they are at and that's what they can afford at that time. And so if you wanted to preach renewable energy or clean technology to a person like this, you have to make them see how the problem affects them. Because in the first place, if they're not seeing dead bodies lying across the road, they might not understand the importance or urgency of climate change. So how does this access to dirty fuel affect you as a woman? What happens to your cassava that is going down the street? What is the change that you have seen? When you are able to, so what we started to do is that we started linking climate change to how it affects the person in question. So I'm saying all this to say that education is a very important aspect in helping people to realize the opportunity that is there in clean power, especially because it's a matter of urgency. Another issue that I saw is that there is a big gap between decision makers and the people who are the victims, right? And so you have decision makers who make decisions around clean energy, who make decisions about solar power. You find that the people who are facing the impact have not been consulted, or the people who are facing the impact have not had a say. So you find some of these solutions being incomplete or not being practicable by the people who it has been created for. I do know that some decision makers across Africa or across the world have generators in their homes, and so they've never really been without access to electricity, and so they sit out in their offices to make these decisions. And then the people who are actually facing those impacts have not been consulted. I know I shared this story with the Drawdown Lift team sometime. I was at the COP26 last year, and I talked to a woman who was from the clean cooking sector, and who said that some of the clean cooking products that were brought, they were not interested in it. Herself and community members were not interested in this product. And I was like, what's going on? But this is a helpful product for you. It's going to solve your problem. It's also better for your health. And then she tells me that a lot of the women there are already used to a certain type of way to cook. Let me tell you guys one thing. Some people in rural Africa do not care about climate change. Because they do not understand how it kills them or how it affects them. But if you're able to tie your message with how that affects them economically, their business, and how it affects their health, you'll be able to pass the message across. And I hope I'm still answering the question, but I'm trying to say this to say that educating people about these benefits, relating your solution to how it affects them is a key way to go. And that is what we've been doing at Renewable Energy Tech Training Institute and Climate Smart Nigeria. And I hope that I've answered the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria. And I think you raised some really important points around the importance of people understanding the climate crisis and educating people, but also ensuring full participation of people that you're working with. So they have the absolute right to kind of participate and be consulted and co-create the solutions that we want to see. So brilliant, thank you. I'm going to come back to Jill. I'm hoping we have time to do another quick round from all of the panelists before we open to the questions from the participants who've joined us. Jill, a second question for you is about going back to clean cooking again. There are many barriers that sort of prohibit the uptake of clean cook stoves. Could you talk to these and share some strategies about how you overcame those barriers?
Sure. I mean, I think Gloria did just a really nice job of summarizing some of these challenges. I think maybe one thing that I want to highlight is the encouraging news on this front, which is that there's actually been really massive improvements in primary use of clean energy fuels. So like since the 1990s to now, I mean, we've moved from around half the world's population primarily using polluting fuels to around, I think, just over a third of the world's population. So that's a big improvement. Households do shift to clean fuels when it's affordable and accessible. They're faster, they keep their homes cleaner, they don't require the massive like harvesting and storage of home. Like these fuels take up a lot of space, right? Like coal burning for a winter takes up the entirety of your courtyard. So I think the challenge, and Gloria highlighted this really well, is like, how do we reach that last 1/3 of the global population? And it is a bit static right now. And it's because there's been two really big challenges. The first is, moving rural households to cleaner household energy packages. Like they've started using cleaner fuels, but they're still using a lot of polluting fuels. And then, again, what Gloria highlighted, sub-Saharan Africa has been a major challenge. Like in urban areas, there's been a preference for wood charcoal over some of the other cleaner fuels that are available. So, we haven't seen the same shift in urban areas of sub-Saharan Africa that we have seen in the rest of the world. So I guess, moving forward, and I'd love to hear my, co-panelists' views on this as well. I think, the first thing is just focusing on technologies and solutions that that work. They're high quality, they're proven. There's been, I think, a tendency in the household energy sector to go towards lower cost. And unfortunately, that's often translated into lower quality. So improved biomass stoves have been a massive problem. They break. They've, in many cases, increased pollution in homes. They've made, been detrimental to child health. So I think making sure that those solutions provide a benefit, like that needs to be like the basic requirement for these things. I think the second is that there has to be a range of solutions. Like there's not going to be a single stove that's going to work for everyone around the world in every context. All of us in our kitchens in North America and in Europe, we have probably like 15 different kitchen appliances that we use, and they all meet different needs, right? Energy use is complex. So I think thinking about what are the range of different technologies that can be provided is important. And then the last thing I'll just mention is that I think we have to be careful not to let perfect be the enemy of the good here. So I think, fuels like pelletized biomass that are burned in an appropriate stove, they still produce pollution emissions, right? And pollution emissions are bad for health, but certainly, they're improvements from a traditional coal or biomass stove. So there is some improvement there. It's not as good as an electric stove, but it is providing some benefit, and it might be a technology that's available for people that aren't necessarily perfect, have the greatest connection to the grid or consistent connection to the grid. I also think fuels like gas are not a perfect climate solution, but they're really well liked. And most studies indicate that these are going to be better for climate than a solid fuel stove. So I think taking those three things together is important moving forward for addressing this really complex problem.
Thank you so much, Jill. I think really important points about being clear on the benefits and also recognizing not one solution fits everybody. Ademola, I'm coming back to you now. I think people really enjoyed your example from Kamako in Zambia, but could you give us another example of how climate smart agriculture could help in this sweet spot of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and helping resilience and reducing poverty?
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. Now, in the World Bank, we have the Next Generation Africa Climate Business Plan launched in 2020 that provides a platform for climate action by focusing on Africa's development challenges and priorities. With an investment of just $5 billion, about 24 million farmers have already been reached with climate smart agriculture. We are supporting the rollout of food system resilience programs that enhance the natural resource base. That's another thing that is very, very crucial. When you are talking about building resilience, reducing emissions, and improving livelihoods. So these food system programs sequester carbon, they strengthen food value chains, and build regional capacity to manage agricultural risk. So because climate adaptation and mitigation need to go together. We are using these programs to also tackle the underlying structural challenges of food insecurity, and also to address the vulnerability to unpredictable climate and conflict events. I mean, we have some areas now where food security problems and climate change have led to climate migration. So all of these problems require us to come in and provide solutions as far as the issues are concerned. Now, what do we do in terms of the solutions? We make the menu of options to be flexible, and they also incorporate both short-term responses and long-term transformative solutions. These are very, very important. So those long-term transformative solutions involve building resilient productive capacity, managing natural resources sustainably, and also enhancing market access and commercialization, in addition to improving the policy and regional coordination. Now, what do we notice, generally speaking? The climate and productivity benefits of these programs notwithstanding, what we have found out is that the adoption can face a variety of socioeconomic and institutional barriers. Things like the need for significant upfront expenditure on the part of poorer farmers, the non-availability of some inputs in the local markets. I mean, when Yusuf was talking the other time, he was talking about the food crisis induced by the problem in Ukraine. Now fertilizers have gone, prices have gone up the roof. Now, also, there are some other problems related to lack of information about the potential of improved techniques. Glory talked about the other time about creating awareness on what improved practices actually really means. It's a problem that needs to be addressed. Then there are some techniques that are associated with sustainable land management that are not compatible to what the farmers are already aware of. I saw in the chat box that some people are talking about indigenous farming systems, agroforestry practice, and so on. Indeed, these exist. And when we go in there, we try to look at what is on the ground and what can be done to encourage participatory development of techniques or scaling up of those techniques that already work. Now, in some instances also, and that's the last problem related to adoption, is that the diffusion of some technologies require what we call collective action on the part of the farmers and the social capital, which may be lacking in some places. What this means then is that when we talk about climate solution, it's not only for the people in the laboratories alone. We also need social scientists to come into the field to help us to really scale up these issues. So taking it together, what are we using our financing, our technical capacity to do in the World Bank? Our investment projects are designed such that we overcome adoption constraints by providing specific material inputs, linking farmers to markets, providing technical assistance for design and delivery of critical interventions. For instance, digital agriculture is becoming very, very important as far as helping to address climate concerns is concerned. Then we also need to build up capacity in terms of training and skills development for technologies that are knowledge intensive. Then lastly, we strengthen local institutions to catalyze adoption. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adam. There's so many important points covered there, but one of them links really closely to what I was going to ask Glory next. Glory, you've done a lot of work in the area of education. You mentioned that, in fact, in your first intervention. How can donors and policymakers and leaders ensure that the youth and young people, and to Save the Children, are really educated and can be part of the discussions around climate and poverty, and that their voices are really heard?
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that in Nigeria, 77 million people are without access to electricity out of 200 million population. And the remainder of that are struggling with unreliable electricity or incompetent access, regular power outages, right? So now the people are open to an alternative, but the alternative is not really very simple. You don't just go out there and get solar. Right, so because the people are interested in an alternative, that opens up an opportunity to teach people, right, about these alternatives. What are the economics? What are the engineering? What are the financial aspects of it? Because it has opened up a whole new world of entrepreneurship, right? Especially in Nigeria, where most of the people are entrepreneurial, are very entrepreneurial. So they're looking to how to solve that problem in their community. And so we decided to start our institute to train just these kinds of people who want to go into providing access to alternative power to the members of their community. So in Nigeria, we don't like usually waiting for government to do things. We want to also see how to support government to do those things. And so you find that there are several different paths to alternative electricity. So in Nigeria, for instance, we do have access to the sun power for almost all through, in fact, all through the season. Even the rainy season, you still have daylight, which charges the solar panels. But the people need to know how these things work. I know it sounds simple, but it's very, very complex. Right, so there are different parts. There is a marketing part, there is engineering part, there is the design part. How can solar power work for a banking industry? How can solar power work for a one-room small business down the street? How can solar power work for a woman who sells cold drinks? What are these different parts and what are these different applications? And how can I, as an entrepreneur, provide these solutions to my community? And so that provided a different need to train people on how to do these things, right? And I'd like to point out that solar power is not a savior. It will not save Africa. I'd like to be very clear about that. Africa is dealing with a large problem of lack of electricity, and it's going to take more than solar power to solve that, right? I know that I've had conversations where people were like, what about gas, which we have in large deposits, especially in Nigeria, right? What about using gas as a base load? So the truth is that the conversation is ongoing, especially if we want to reach net zero, right? We have to consider solutions that we have to consider situations where all of the stakeholders I forget the word, that is good for all the stakeholders that are involved, right? And so I was going to say that policymakers and stakeholders and the people in these sectors can encourage and support initiatives like ours. I work at Renewable Energy Technology Training Institute. They should reach out to see how we can work together, right? Instead of trying to compete. How can we work together to help more people become entrepreneurs or become trained workforce for the renewable energy industry? Right. So now a lot of investment has gone into development of renewable energy in Africa. In 2015, we hit a peak, $330 billion, according to IRENA. $330 billion were invested globally for the development of renewable power. Now, most of our funds come to Africa because Africa and South Asia has a lot of the problem. But who are the people who are going to deploy the solutions is what we're talking, the question that I'm asking. Who are the people who are going to deploy these solutions? In our school, we have engineers coming to our school, people with master's degree, coming to our school to learn about solar power. It's because it is a different type of education that the people have to know. And so the point I'm really trying to make is that if Africa wants to reach complete access to sustainable electricity by 2063, according to African Union, they have to invest into young people or the youth who are going to be policymakers in that time, right? So that they can understand what it takes, so they can create policy that will solve this problem. People need to be skilled on the marketing. Entrepreneurs need to start businesses to reach community members in the areas where there is lack of electricity. And so there are two things that are important. We need to train competent, employable workforce, engineers who are going to deploy mini grid, solar power, and all the different kinds of applications of renewable energy in communities where we lack them. And we need to train entrepreneurs, especially in Nigeria, where I'm from. There are lots more people who are entrepreneurs who want to start businesses. And so you see them already deploying these solutions without knowledge. And so we have the problem. The reason I started Renewable Energy Tech Training Institute is because I saw three types of problems. The first thing is that I saw a clinic, a health center, which had solar panels on it, but it was not functioning. That was very interesting because at the time that I saw these solar panels, I had just been introduced to solar power. And I was curious, how come the solar power is not functioning for a health center? I went in there and talked to the people there, and they said it stopped working after 6 months. I quickly realized that there were three issues. One is that there is no capacity for the people that install the solar power. Now, there are traders. There are people who trade, buy and sell solar products, buy and sell solar components, who do not understand the engineering. And so customers approach these people on the roadside and ask them to put solar for them. Eventually, the solar that is installed does not do the work. That's problem number one, access to capacity. Number two is that there is a problem of substandard products out there in the market. So when I'm talking about education, you see all the different parts and things that people have to know about so that we can really reach that access to electricity. And so when people do not know how to identify correct solar panels, the capacity of the battery to use for my one-bedroom house, they would make mistakes. And then the third thing I found is that the beneficiaries themselves do not understand how to manage the solar power. And so because you have solar power in your house, and I need to make something clear because of the participants from all over the world, in Nigeria, we think that light should cover for everything. When there is light, meaning when there is electricity, everything should come on the power. Now, people make the mistake to overload those solar installations. And so it crashes and fails. It is because they do not know. I'm just trying to point out how education is important and what policymakers can help to do, provide incentives for people to want to learn these things, provide solutions for people who work in the government houses to install solar power so that they can provide opportunities for those entrepreneurs that we train.
Glory, brilliant. Thank you so much. And so many practical issues there that you brought up around why people need to be trained and what the incentives need to be to get more and more people aware and into these great green job opportunities so that they can provide good quality services. We're running out of time. So what I'm going to do is just give Yusuf a chance to answer one question briefly, if you can, Yusuf, that came up in the Q&A. And with the other Q&A, we'll try and just reply by type. Yusuf, one of the questions I think that you wanted to try and answer out loud was about how much of local concepts and techniques have been incorporated into this work and into your recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, the report clearly has a global outlook, but all the solutions that can be implemented needs to be adapted to local setting. We don't want maladaptation. In some places, we have seen that wrong mangrove trees have been planted, and instead of protecting, it is causing more harm. And similarly, the other point that was raised was the importance of indigenous and local knowledge. Absolutely, it's very, very important. A recent report showed that without indigenous knowledge, we cannot achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius. So it's very important that A, solutions are locally adapted, and B, we incorporate all the knowledge and information we have from the local people for the solutions to be successful in that setting. So back to you, Yolanda.
Thanks, Yusuf. So we're going to have to draw the session to a close shortly. We did want to just, first of all, say thank you so much to all the panelists and Yusuf for his presentation. Thank you to all of you for joining and for your brilliant comments in the chat and your questions. We are going to share a little poll at the end now, just because we want to make sure that you have a bit of a think about what you could personally do to take forward some of the suggestions and discussion points raised today. I won't read out the points on there, but have a little think about whether you could take on any of these calls to action. It'll help us think about tailoring products and events and sessions in future to meet your needs and to do what this whole the drawdown report is trying to do, is to achieve both a sustainable climate and a well-being for all. So thank you so much. We've also multiple times in the chat shared the link tree to both the report in English and French and other resources that are available. As was mentioned at the beginning, there's another session again, a second session, which you'd be very welcome to sign up for. And I'm just going to hand back to Kristen for any final remarks and thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Yolanda, and thank you so much to Jill, Ademola, and Glory for joining us. You really helped enrich the discussion a lot with your expertise. And of course, thanks to Yusuf for your great presentation outlining the highlights of the report. And we are putting some links in the chat, so please check those out. One is for joining the webinar next week, the second webinar in the series, which will focus on protecting and restoring ecosystems and fostering equity. And also there is a link tree, which is kind of a cool thing that has links to all of the different reports and publications from Drawdown Lift, as well as from Project Drawdown, because a lot of you had questions about Project Drawdown's general work as well, in addition to the information that we shared in the report. And this is great to see all of the different ways that you all, plan to take actions on the information that we talked about today. So implementing the climate solutions we discussed, listening to and partnering with diverse stakeholders, including human well-being when developing climate solutions, accelerating the development of innovative finance for climate solutions, and of course, doing even more research and discovering additional ways to focus on the climate poverty connection. So thank you all again. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks especially to all of our guest panelists and moderator for joining us today. Take care.